Is the current economic crisis a boon or bust for women in the workforce? Is gender diversity going to get thrown out the window as companies slash budgets and reduce workforce? Here with us today are two women who can help us to answer that question. Sylvia Hewlett is an economist and a well-known author, and Herminia Ibarra is an INSEAD professor and specializing in gender diversity. Thank you very much, Sylvia and Herminia, for being with us. Sylvia, let me start with you. What dangers are there to policies of gender diversity in today's economic climate?
Companies are newly appreciative of the business case for the kinds of diversity that we're talking about, and are in touch with the research that shows that productivity goes up. If you have diverse teams, that your return on equity looks better, if you do a good job by women at the top, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the connect between doing well by diversity and helping the bottom line is perhaps sufficiently well known for that to be a driver in this recession. So I think both things are true.
Yeah, and if I can add something there, I think a piece of good news in all of that is that companies, because of the crunch, have less tolerance for practices that are window dressing or practices that aren't really producing returns, so that there's been a much greater focus on what works and where's the value added.
Right. And I also think, we can't ignore just how highly motivated and highly necessary work is to women these days. Just think of two figures from my very recent work this fall. 39% of U.S. female graduates in the workplace now out-earn their partners and husbands. 39%. Another fact from the October research data, 25% of working women with degrees, i.e., the credentialed workforce, if you like, are either married to men who are newly unemployed or newly retired. So it isn't as though, this was some kind of pin money discretionary thing anymore. I mean, women are incredibly necessary, incredibly motivated, and, really in the workplace for good. As we know, in the U.S., the number of working women now is a larger number than that of men. I mean, that magic figure.
The 50%.
Absolutely. It crossed the 50% mark in November. So I don't think we can question the tremendous importance and value of female work these days.
During the panel discussion today, you mentioned extreme jobs as being those where people are engaged for more than 73 hours a week. It seems to me that from what you've said that perhaps there can only be one extreme job per couple.
There's a very interesting dynamic. We find that if you take men with extreme jobs, and the average work week for an extreme worker is in fact 73 hours a week, only 6% of men with extreme jobs are married to a high-earning woman, right? But with women with extreme jobs, 2/3 of them have partners who have extreme jobs. So I think, unfortunately, extreme jobs are much less onerous for men because they're so much more likely to have an at-home partner kind of looking after the rest of life for them. Whereas an extreme job when held by a woman is often a little bit of a battleground because she absolutely is negotiating the whole family, private life burden or set of challenges with a partner who very likely is also, dealing with the 70-hour work job reality. So the structural reality is very different for men and women.
Herminia, you mentioned during the discussion that men tend to start higher, earn more, and have a higher level of satisfaction as they enter the business world than women. Is that going to be the case in the future?
Understanding that that is the case is already a big step. I think those findings, which are going to be coming out in a forthcoming article in March in the Harvard Business Review, are going to surprise a lot of people, because up until this point, I think we knew that there was a disparity, certainly in terms of salary, between men and women, and high-credentialed men and women. But I think we hadn't understood the extent to which that disparity starts early, holds despite different similarities in the kinds of jobs, industries, and geographies that men and women come into. And so we're trying to learn, this by the way, is coming out of a large-scale survey conducted by Catalyst, in which INSEAD was a research partner, including schools, MBA alumni from schools across the globe. And I think the results are going to surprise a lot of people. Now, once we understand what's going on, I think we can have, at least we increase the likelihood of being creative and coming up with solutions, but awareness is really a very first step.
Is there something business schools can do about this?
I think schools can do a lot simply in helping their students learn a lot of the soft skills that make a big difference when you get out into the corporate world. For example, at INSEAD, our negotiations courses are among the most popular, so that's a very key skill that you need in order to make sure that you're coming in at the right level, at the right salary, at the right package. And I think working very closely with our career services, companies, students, faculty can learn a lot about what is going on. Again, be informed so as to shape the future, because I don't think the situation helps anybody. It doesn't help the alums, and it doesn't help the companies, which will acquire a reputation for practices that are just inequitable.
Sylvia, you have a new book, part of the Memo to the CEO series, Top Talent, Keeping Performance Up When Business is Down, published by Harvard University Press. What's the takeaway from this?
The key takeaway is that in a recession, you can't take your top performers for granted. I mean, the assumption often is, they need to just sit tight and deliver 110% because, of course, with high rates of unemployment, they have no options. Well, what this book shows is that there's tremendous disengagement, there's tremendous flight risk right this second, because top performers are walking out the door in very large numbers precisely because they are being neglected. They're not being focused on or developed, by their companies, by their organizations. And the dangers are particularly acute around women. The flight risk around women very high, and again I want to stress they're not going home. They're crossing over to sectors that are less risky, that perhaps have a better value proposition for them, or they're becoming entrepreneurs.
We just recently did a study of the top CEOs of the decade, and it's a list on which there are very few women, and that was expected because it's been such a short time in which we've seen a significant number of women heading large S&P global companies. But the very interesting finding there, of the 29 women who are on this list of nearly 2,000 CEOs, the majority of them, more than half as many as the men, were placed in the CEO position from the outside. And so what that says to me is that these women are either not competing in or not making it in their own company's internal tournament for CEO. The men are more likely to be insiders, and being an insider actually gives you an edge.
Part of it could be the ability to network within the company, which means networking with the old boy network.
But it is fascinating that women's external networks are often better than their internal networks, and doesn't bode well in the long run, does it?
It does not.
Either for the women or for the company. And there are danger signals there.
Yeah, well, when a woman leaves a company, her network is actually quite portable because most of the time it's an external network, and so she brings that network to her competitor much more easily than a man whose network tends to be more internal.
But internally, she might be quite isolated. And obviously that's bad news for engagement as well as flight risk.
Let me end by asking you a question about affirmative action. I mean, this was a term that was very prevalent when I got into the workforce. What is the difference between gender diversity and affirmative action? Are we having the same discussion, maybe with a different vocabulary?
Well, I think the semantics have changed. Affirmative action, gender diversity. I think both terms are being replaced right this second by phrases like talent innovation. One of my perspectives from my new global work is that if you take the global talent pool these days, everyone in the world with at least, say, a BA degree, only 17% of that pool comprises white men. Everyone else is either a woman or a multicultural person. So, diversity isn't something on the edges. It's not some kind of side issue. It is the mainstream.
Thank you very much, Sylvia and Herminia, for being with us today on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thanks.